Hello everyone, you might hear me clearing my throat there at the beginning of the video. Thank you very much for joining me, and today is going to be a little bit of a different video. This is titled Almost Out of Alpha for my indie project, and this is going to be me going over some of the videos and addressing how I've fixed things since this alpha test that we did. So these are all from testers. Well, specifically from one tester. What I did was I asked chat to test the game for me. And what ended up happening was only a handful of people tested it and give me like written feedback. And there was one person in particular that did exactly what I asked for, who, interestingly enough, also has industry experience. So that kind of explains it. You know, but yeah, what I did was I got feedback from them, and the feedback I got was these videos that were sent to me through Google. As you can see, the tester navigates the map, jumps all the way across to where the AI spawns. Bear in mind, as we pause here for a moment, this is a test block out of the eventual map. The only reason for this is just to check how the AI navigates through the level. And this was using the old AI. So here he goes. He goes up the stairs. He's checking. And then he hears something behind him. And he turns around. Runs after the player. And the player's trying to lose sight of him. Now what happens is normally after a certain amount of time out of sight, the AI will go back to its patrol path. But what happens is the player jumps up on top of the car here. And then jumps up on the roof. And the AI loses track. And immediately is like, wait, what? Because its vision cone here. Its vision cone only goes, I think, about 45 degrees. So what's happening is the player's actually hiding out of sight of the vision cone. The AI is wondering what's going on. And then as the player moves around, the AI is stuck in position for a little bit because the AI is programmed to kind of wait around in one area for a little bit and then move on. So what's happening is he's performing his stationary sort of wait procedure, and then as the player makes a move behind him, that's when he turns around again. So that was interesting. That gave me a insight into the AI and its abilities to follow the player and also to lose the player, mainly from when the player was stood on something. And again, the same tester does the well, similar stuff here, but it's pretty interesting to see from my point of view as a developer instead of being on the other end. The AI goes upstairs like he normally does. For some strange reason, he just loves going upstairs. So the player follows him, and the AI hears his footsteps and comes running down the stairs. So the player then runs in here and uses a chair to block this. Meanwhile, the AI has lost sight of the player and is wondering where he's gone. And this gives the player enough time to block these doorways with chairs. Now, the AI isn't coming in here while these chairs are in the way, because how Unreal's AI works is it works on a nav mesh based system where you drag out a volume, the entire map's floor goes green. They're heavy. The entire map's floor goes green, and that green indicates where the AI can go. Now for this, what I did was I decided it would be pretty crazy to have the AI constantly bumping into things. Mainly because one of the other systems that I have been using, where the AI can hear things, was intersecting with the move to mechanic early on. What was happening in simple terms was that the AI was moving to a location. When I was throwing stuff, it was then moving to a location like it should, but because the AI was bumping into stuff, it was then triggering another sound effect, and the way that the code was done is that whenever a sound effect is triggered at a location, it moves to that location. So if you go back in my videos, you'll see earlier videos where the AI will keep running over and over and over again into objects, which triggers a sound, which then triggers the move to location. So he's constantly then chasing his own sort of tail of sorts. He's chasing something that he's touching himself, so he's being real stupid. So it was either try and find out a complicated way of getting him to figure out that, yeah, you might as well just forget this thing that has right next to you because you've already touched it. Or the easier way of solving that issue was to make it so the AI does not go near certain parts of the nav mesh. And that's what we're seeing here. All these objects are designed in such a way that when the AI goes near them, he doesn't collide with them. And that way, it stops him running into them. I could also make it so he only goes a certain radius away from these things, but it was still a bit risky. But by making it so that the affected nav mesh, what happens is it just tries to navigate them. But as a neat thing that I didn't actually think of was that by providing the player with a unlimited amount of objects that interfere with the nav mesh, technically you can block the AI from moving. So what was happening here was we're filling up each doorway with all of these chairs, and as a result, the security room, the one place that is arguably the most securest, is now even securer because the AI's nav mesh can't go past those chairs. So technically, everything's safe now. So the tester more or less used that to their advantage, and I did not think about that at the time. This is one of the things that I kind of took for granted was, yeah, I've got collision affecting models everywhere, but I don't expect the player to be able to block anything. That kind of should have been one of the things that I'd have thought of straight away, but was overlooked. As a result, the AI here, you can see he's trying to navigate. He can see the player, so his code is going off and saying, look, there's the player, I need to move to them. But because these models are in the way and effectively stopping him from moving because of them interfering with the nav mesh, the player is then able to make fun of the AI by just chucking items at him. So here we are, chucking files at him and they're bouncing off his face. And yeah, he's getting really annoyed where it's not realistic. It is funny though. It is funny. But also, because these items are making sounds, what's happening is the AI is then moving to them again, so the AI gets kind of stuck in this loop where he can't go anywhere, but the player can't go anywhere either. That's the important thing that I took away from this after seeing this, was that yes, it's possible to blockade the AI in certain areas, but the player couldn't go anywhere, and to progress with the narrative, you'd have to go out of the security office again to complete objectives, so it kind of leaves them at a stalemate. Either way, the one way that I've figured out how I might be able to mess around with this, apart from trying to tweak the, is the AI able to move certain objects as heavy? No, I was going to get to that. The way that I figured out how to solve this issue was, at the moment, all of these meshes, like I've said, they mess around with the nav mesh. So if a mesh is there, there's like an invisible circle around it, or an invisible box that says, look, you can't move in this area because there's a mesh here. So he will try and find any other area, even if it's really narrow. And my idea recently was to add another task to the AI, where if its path is blocked for a certain amount of time, it then applies a impulse, which is kind of like a force that affects physics objects. And apply an impulse just in front of the AI with just enough force that it can move some of the heavier objects like the chairs and stuff. I thought that would be a bit more realistic, then tie an animation to it as if he's kicking or as if he's shoving, and then it gives you the sense that, yeah, he's trying to move stuff out of the way. That would make sense, because then that would correct the issue with him not being able to navigate the nav mesh because of these meshes being in the way. But that was something that I came up for that anyway. As for the jumping from the previous video that I showed off, the way to fix that is I went full Resident Evil classic Capcom Dino Crisis style thing on it, where you can't jump. So at the moment, we don't have a jump ability anymore, so all this jumping around on building roofs and stuff that the specific tester was doing, you just can't do that anymore. You can't jump on cars, you can't jump on the roof here. Why would you? You know, it's an easy way out. So, one is an implemented fix for not jumping, and another one is work in progress in terms of the ability to make the AI shove stuff out the way. This one is an interesting one, with the player just kind of picking up a chair here, and then moving with it around the environment to tease the AI out. If I remember rightly, he uses the chair as a block so that the AI can't get him. I'm actually surprised the AI's not heard this yet, though, although it might be out of his distance at this point. What he's done is he's gone into one of the computer offices, and as a result, he's kept walking around. He's probably either waiting around here or he's going around the other side. The player's kind of confused here at this point and goes back. I think he's getting chased now. I'm not too sure. It's because of the way the AI moves, because it's completely random. He could be there, he couldn't be, so the player's kind of freaking out here at this point. As you can see, the player's actually decided he's going to be smart and use the chair as a defensive item, which is something I didn't expect either, would be that, oh yeah, you can just carry an item around for an indefinite amount of time. What I might do here with this, because you can see the tester, or the player, moving around with this infinitely, the only other thing I can think of, really, is making it so you can only hold certain objects for a certain amount of time. So if it weighs a lot, you can't just carry it around all over the place like this, because that would get rid of that issue. Love the way this tester gets the thing stuck on the door there, because they're going around an area of the test map that isn't developed yet. Obviously, they're not going in any room that's dark here, because they don't have the flashlight either. I think he was trying to get it stuck there to see what would happen, but... yeah, we've got him constantly looking around for the AI and unable to find him. I think he runs into him here in a moment. See, the AI was pretty decent at navigating this originally. Oh, here he goes up the stairs. There he is. So because, again, it interferes with the nav mesh, the AI sees the player. The flickering light was distracting. It's meant to be. The lights will either be off or flickering in the full one at some point, so it's going to be interesting trying to decide on that. But yeah, as you can see, because the player was holding something that interferes with the nav mesh, the AI saw the player, ran to the location roughly where the player was, and then instead decided, because you're out of my field of vision, immediately go to the searching pattern again, where what happens is it searches the local area for any sort of hiding places. This was an old AI, by the way. So it responds to the sound effect, goes to the location, sees the player, and the player gets a game over. So that was normal functions at the end, but because the player was holding an item, that obviously caused issues with navigation. Number 4, I'm not quite sure what number 4 was here. Honestly, I wish more people would do this kind of thing where they send me videos from Google Docs so I can actually see what's going on. This, I think, was another one, was the fact that the AI can't climb on certain objects. He loses track of the player and immediately goes to searching, which sends him searching the local area. Then he comes back, but because the player's on a desk, the player's just kind of making fun of him, and the AI can see him. He's like, I know where you are, but you can't get to him, so the player's resorting to just making fun of him. So now the player's finding a way of getting around him by jumping across places, and obviously the AI is reacting to other things at the same time. Its AI tree at this point, or its behavior tree, is going crazy. What's happening is that he's hearing objects, he's going towards those locations, and those are his primary objectives at this point because of the way the code was wrote. Obviously now, because there's so many chairs there as well, he shouldn't be able to navigate that small area, so you should have a blockade there. So the AI is waiting, because he can hear a sound. The idea was that it was supposed to be coded in a kind of a realistic manner, in sorts where you'd hear a sound, and the AI would wait for a second, kind of look as if it was thinking about what it was doing in terms of going to a location, whether it should immediately sort of run to it, or whether it should just wait and see if anything's going on. then move to that location, and then wait again to see if it sees anything or hears anything else. That was the idea. But as a result, because the tester is, or the player is throwing a load of stuff around, the AI is just kind of like, no, I'm getting blocked, I'm out of here, I'll go the other way where I can actually move around. Heavy, which light specifically are you on about here? I'm just looking in chat here. Like, I can change the flicker rate. I'm just wondering which light you're on about here, because most of these are just default. Yeah, Nugs, I'm just, like, this is an older build, so it's not got all of the stuff in, but this is just somebody's test videos they've sent me as well. The idea is to get it so it's like end of the PlayStation lifespan in terms of like the technology would be there to have it be a little bit more graphically impressive, and interaction wise it would be a little bit more impressive. But apart from that, I'm trying to get it to emulate that sort of thing. Love the way he's lost track of the AI here. So he's just chucking the furniture around and seeing if the AI is there. Which is kind of cool. I mean, the AI doesn't come in the security office here, so he's fine, but he doesn't know that. The room just after entering the side exit. Oh, this one on the right here, where my mouse is, the storage room. Down there. Yeah, I can tweak the flashing in there to be slower. That's one thing I'm going to have to do is when I'm doing more lighting effects like that, is to test like what's strenuous on people, mainly because of photosensitivity issues and stuff like that. That's going to be a big focal point for testing in future. So there's the AI again. The AI is confused now, primarily just because of the way that it was coded. But it's halfway between searching and randomizing. I should have really put my my test video that I did on here as well, instead of just this one single tester's videos. But as you can see, the tester's blocking the AI with the object like I was on about before. It interferes with the nav mesh, so the AI can't get to the player. It's trying. It can see the player, but it can't do it, so when it gets blocked and can't get the player, well then it decides to return to its searching mode. At the moment, all the player can really do is try and evade. And then, of course, because he randomly moves as well, then you've got him moving around. But I don't know what happened here. This was one thing that was really interesting, was the AI moving between locations in a very fast manner, just backwards and forwards, and then going back there. That was something that was really weird to me, because that makes no sense on how it switches. Where were we? Like, it can't move towards the player, so it keeps searching for a way round, I think. Then it sees the player and comes back. Then it realizes it can't get to it again, and then goes back again. That's the only way I can think of the behavior tree working there, because the way that it's split up is there are different branches that go from left to right, and the left branch is the one that's triggered first. The left side of this specific build was something like idle, patrol, searching, learn room, and then heard sound, and then hostile. So hostile was the far right, so it was the one that it wasn't going to hit the most you'd expect, and that its main options were just patrol areas. It was really weird. Heavy says, could maybe give objects some sort of durability meter if you want to keep them being defense items, or maybe have the AI push through. See, that's what I'm thinking of with the impulse idea that I was on about before, is have the AI run a check or something to say, like, look, the player's holding this with its hands. Or in this case, it's basically like the Half-Life 2 gravity gun. I've even called it that at some points in earlier videos. Like, if the grav gun is holding an item, then Check to see how long it's been held for. If the AI can't navigate around it, apply an impulse to it, or do something to make the player drop the item. Trigger an event that drops the item, because I think there is an event in the coding that just says drop item. It's what happens when I bash a bunch of code together from different people's tutorials. It's like I remember certain parts of it and other bits I don't. I'll have to go back and have a look. But yeah, drop the item when the AI has been around it for a certain amount of time, or after a certain period of time, because realistically, you're not going to walk around a large environment with an office chair in your hands all the time. It just ain't happening. Office chairs, they're not amazingly heavy, but like for the average person, you're not going to be able to walk around for like 20 minutes or so with an office chair just held out at arm's length. It ain't possible. So yeah, there's going to be a fix for that in future. Another interesting addition that I made here in the newer build was that the player can't always run. Like I've mentioned before, I took away the jump because it seems stupid to be able to jump on top of roofs and everything else. So it's more classic survival horror style. But another thing that I also did was I've limited the sprint. This build originally had unlimited sprint. So what I've done is I've limited it at the moment so that after a while you run out of stamina. When you've run out of stamina, you can't sprint immediately. You have to wait until your stamina's recovered a little bit, and then you can sprint, where it gives the AI time to catch up. So it's more encouraging the idea of distracting the AI by throwing objects. That's where I'm up to at the moment with this. Heavy says, can the AI see through held objects? I think it can. I think it can see through held objects. I'd have to test that in the more recent build that I've got, because the way that it sees is totally different now to the last time. The last time, this used a very old way of seeing things, which was used in a lot of Unreal tutorials like 2 or 3 years ago. I've been trying to keep up with everything, but the way that tutorials are online, it's kind of like with 3D modeling and stuff. You always find like some really good tutorials that tell you exactly what you need, but sometimes some of them are out of date, or other times they're using information that is not the best, not optimized. Like for instance, I think I've still got bits of my code that aren't optimized properly because they use what's called an event tick, which is from what I understand, it's a highly intensive event that Unreal runs to try and keep track of certain things over time. So I've got to take that event tick out at some point. I think I had 2 or 3 of them in this build, which is not good practice for coding, apparently. So yeah, it's interesting because most of this was done with older tutorials. And specifically, the way that it saw in this was via a view cone. And I'm going to go over this in a moment, see what this test is doing here. But the view cone is more or less like you'd expect. Very similar to classic Metal Gear Solid style, where it has a invisible cone that it can see up to, like a certain distance. And the way that it was wrote was that the code that was given to me, that I've based all this off the previous code base, I think it was in Russian. But some guy had released it to the marketplace ages ago, and that's what I've been working off because it seemed pretty easy to work off at the start. And parts of the Russian code were specifically designed to be able to pick up where the player was and determine how long they were in the view cone or whatever. Whereas instead now I'm using what's called AI perception, where it is fixed to the actual AI, and there's a little bit more, I'd say, a little bit more accurate in terms of finding the player and then homing in on them, or at least that's what other tutorials would make me believe anyway. So I've got to kind of decide which one's better at this point, whether it be the view cone one or the perception one. Either way, I've still got both builds side by side. I've not totally overwrote everything, and I do keep backups, so Like when I'd done this build, I backed this up before I sent it out, and then with the newer build that uses perception, I backed that up about 3 times. So current build a little bit different. I might even go into it in a bit, or in a separate video. But another thing here is that the tester has thrown an item, so naturally the move 2 is triggered, and then the player is then trying to use the flashlight to trigger the AI. And what's happening is the code is getting stuck between 2 phases and its original tree. What's happening is it's hearing an object being thrown, it's landing on the floor, so the AI is navigating towards it. But then they've also used the flashlight as well, which makes the AI move to the flashlight location. The flashlight has a very similar invisible view cone, and when the AI figures out or has collision detection for that view cone, when it senses that cone, it moves to that location where it was to kind of give you the impression that the AI has seen the flashlight and is going, ooh, flashlight, I wonder what's over there. You know, so it moves towards it. And what's happening here is it's moved towards it, and then it's gone back to its patrol again. I don't know why it's gone back to its patrol, but now it's sort of getting confused. Primarily because the flashlight has a long range as well. So what's happened is by using the flashlight down the corridor, the AI has moved down the corridor to that location and has kind of been lured out of the way. And then he's navigating back round to the player, while the player's blocking this area with the chair there. So yeah, the nav mesh is intersected. So the AI came round to another way, well, found another way around to get to the player. But then he's going back to the chair again because of the sound that was heard. Now the players are able to sprint for an infinite amount of time and evade capture, so the AI immediately goes back to patrolling again, so there's no sort of constant chase. That's not right, it shouldn't be doing that. Let's have a look. Heavy says, not sure if you can do this with perception, but with view cones, I think it's possible to set multiple cones. Yeah, this is one thing that I've been reading up on recently, which is the Alien AI. The Alien AI from Alien Isolation. I thought I was going to say that wrong then. I'm speaking too fast. But I was recently looking at Alien Isolation's AI, mainly because I found modding tools where you can open all of the AI, and the AI works on a similar behavior tree system to this in Unreal. So the idea was that I was going to look into it and see if I could get any ideas from it in terms of its different states, because of it being lauded as one of the best AIs in the industry. And it has different states for different periods of time where it hears something or it sees something, or it has I think it's 3 or 4 different view cones which trigger different things like suspicion, hostile, and things like that. So it's interesting to look at that. I might try and implement that in future because it's going to be a little bit more realistic. But yeah, the AI's run off at this point. He's got confused. He's run off upstairs. I don't know where he is. He should be able to hear the player's footsteps. Player's busy like, wait a minute, where's the AI gone? And there we go. He comes at him at the last moment, runs after him, and the player throws the chair, to which the AI can't move around it. It's trying, you can see it there. The flashlight then distracts it and puts him over there. And then because the nav mesh isn't blocked at the moment, the AI can then chase the player again. The player jumps over the rail there, which would not happen. The AI kind of freaks out. And it's following the flashlight mechanic. So I'm going to have to do something to that because the event tick that it's using at the moment is consistent. By that, what I mean is that when the player uses the flashlight, the idea is that it's supposed to trigger collision detection, and you'll see this in previous dev videos. It's meant to trigger collision detection so that the AI then says, okay, I've collided with this sort of object, I'll move to that location, but the event tick that I'm using for it, like I said before, it's intensive, but it also counts every single millisecond in game. So what's happening is, when you're using the flashlight consistently, the AI is constantly running that event if it's within range. So it's there saying, look, I can see a flashlight, I'm going to this location no matter what. So it's interfering with its attack player tree, or attack player branch, which means that you're able to lure it into stupid situations like this, and then it can't get you. So that's what's happening here. So I need to fix the flashlight before I go ahead and use that mechanic again. Is this the same? I'm trying to figure out whether this is the same video again. I think it might be the same video again. I'm trying to see. The AI couldn't move there because the nav mesh is blocked again, because most of it is blocked. The AI can't move around it. Does the flashlight work on a cone, says Heavy? Yes. So imagine the flashlight when it's on. The actual effect for it, let's go back here. The actual effect for the flashlight that we've got is the actual collision for it. Come on, where is it? I think I've got this on flick through randomized. Trying to find it. There we go. Okay. There's a good shot of it. So this cone effect, this model, that is the actual collision as well. So what happens is, when the AI's sight catches that in the previous build, in this build specifically, the April the 1st one, what's happening is the AI is seeing this cone and its collision, which is specific to this. It doesn't collide with anything else, just the AI's sight. And they're telling the AI, look, you've collided with this, you might want to go check this out. So what's happening is, every time that cone is on screen, there is collision detection for it, so that the AI can then nav to it. That's the problem with it at the moment. What I can do is I can take the event tick off and probably do a once only on it, and then repeat the once only. So what happens is, when it sees it, it'll go to that location once, not consistently, and then do a search around that area, and then move on, and then maybe put a weight on it or a delay so that it doesn't fall for the same thing over and over again. Because ideally, my idea for this was, like, if you see a flashlight and you're trying to break into a place, you're either going to stay away from it, or if you want to take out the guard, you're going to slowly move towards it and then take the guard out, probably by sneaking up behind him. Or if you're just interested, if you see the light and go, wait a minute, I wonder what that's for, you know, and you go over towards it and see it's a guard, and you happen to just be an aggressive intruder like this guy is supposed to be. And the idea is that you see the flashlight and you go, wait a minute. And it's a way to kind of make the player cautious about using the flashlight, because it's going to be helpful in the later game where the visibility is going to be poor, and outside the visibility is going to be poor as well. So it's a case of, do you use the flashlight when the enemy's near, or do you try and move around in the dark? It's not going to be as dark as it is here in game. I'm going to make it a little bit lighter so you can actually see the rest of the environment as well, so you can actually still navigate a little bit. But the idea is to make it so that you're kind of dependent on the flashlight, and you have to kind of think about when you're using it, because you might draw the AI's attention if it's in the area. The whole point of this being that the AI at any point can be wandering around doing whatever it wants. I've been thinking about different mechanics in the time that I've not been doing anything, that more or less allow the AI to be a little bit more interactive and make it seem a little bit more natural. It's just a case of implementing them when I've recovered, obviously. It's partly why I'm using videos today for presentation. That was the previous one. Number 2? I can't remember this one. Was that the same one that we watched before where he gets stuck? Yeah, it is. He gets stuck on the geometry there. Okay. So yeah, quick fixes that have been implemented since that didn't take too much. Disconnecting the jump feature from its actual effect So more or less, the jump feature is still there. I can reconnect it and make it work if I want, but we've taken the jump out because the jump was just easily abused. So you can't jump on desks anymore, and you can't jump on roofs. You can't sprint infinitely like you used to be able to. And as an added bonus for the newer build, the AI has been upgraded. And by that I mean it's just way more aggressive. It will move to the previous location, or the last location that it saw you at, and patrol for a little bit before moving on and patrolling again. And the way that its sight works is slightly different, so it should be way more aggressive. But to get it to that point, I had to gut my AI. Like, it wasn't just a case of going through the Russian code that I had previously and saying, look, I can translate what these parts of this code mean now, and easily still use what I had. No, it was a case of actually having to gut the AI entirely and then rework some bits. The only bits that I actually did keep were the ability to open doors, which was crucial, and the ability to navigate random points, which I'd say is still working as intended compared to the previous version. The previous version used 3 different ways. It was navigate to random points, navigate to points of interest that had hiding spots, which are obviously not used at all. Those are in the base game that I based this off, in terms of taking the code and reworking it. And then the other part was searching for hiding spots. Those bits are completely taken out, so the AI is a little bit more aggressive now. And a little bit more random. So I, obviously when I'm feeling a bit better, I'm going to work more on this and try and get him to work properly so he's not sort of led around like a puppy, you know, looking for items that have either made sounds or a flashlight. And I'm also hoping that by that point as well, he won't be blocked by objects, or if he is, he can get round them. And, yeah, that I can also figure out some sort of solutions for or different mechanics to make him seem a little bit more human, because at the moment he kind of is. I'll leave a link for the newest version to give you an idea on Discord. Specifically, it's going to be a YouTube video that shows off more or less how he works, but it's done by the guy that did the tutorial for the AI. But yeah, I think at this point, I'm confident in saying that provided I can get these little fixes implemented sometime in future, it's going to be a while, but sometime in future, and that they actually work as intended, that I'll actually be out of alpha finally, which then means more working on the environment, the art assets, and the actual storyline, which I've kind of been writing on, like, I think it's 2 or 3 notepads now, just to kind of block it out and give me an idea of what I want to do. I'll be running that past everybody at some point as well, because there are certain bits where I'm constantly writing it so that the player has to go back to the security office to check with the other member of staff after they've done something or to report something. I'm not sure whether that's needed or not at this point, but that's for another discussion in future of how I want this to play out. Anyway, hope you guys have enjoyed. Thanks to everyone that's tested, and thanks to this specific tester that messed this up for me and give me insight into what I need to fix. So I'll see you next time. Bye!